The gunshot cracked through the Montana night like a bullwhip, echoing across the snow-covered valley. Mason Wade worked the lever action of his Winchester Model 1873 with practiced precision, chambering another 44-40 round. His weathered face, etched with lines from 42 hard years, remained expressionless as he scanned the perimeter of Lone Wolf Ranch. The wolves had been growing bolder since the blizzard started 3 days ago. His 4 Morgan horses whinnied nervously in the barn, their instincts alerting them to predators that human eyes couldn't see in the darkness. "Not tonight," Mason muttered, his breath forming crystals in the sub-zero air. The wind howled across Deadwood Falls, Montana, 1878, carrying ice shards that bit at exposed skin like tiny razors. The mercury had dropped below 0 hours ago, and the approaching storm threatened to be the worst in a decade. Mason had survived enough Montana winters to know when death rode the wind. That's when he saw it. A dark shape collapsed by his gate, half buried in the snow. Not an animal, too deliberate in its movements. Mason approached with the caution of a man who'd seen ambushes before. The war between the states had taught him that death wore many masks. His Springfield cavalry boots crunched through knee-deep snow, rifle raised, ready for trouble. He turned the body over with his boot, a woman, Apache by her features, face copper-toned and sharp-featured, dark hair matted with ice and blood. Fresh blood seeped from a bullet wound in her shoulder, the flesh around it already blue with frostbite. "Damn it all," Mason growled, checking for a pulse. Still alive, barely. Against every frontier instinct, he hefted her over his shoulder and trudged back through knee-deep snow toward the ranch house. The door banged open as Mason kicked it with his boot, startling his sons awake. James, his eldest at 10, already had his father's Colt Navy revolver pointed at the doorway, eyes cold and steady as a man twice his age. The boy's aim never wavered. Mason had taught him well. "Put it down, son," Mason said, laying the unconscious woman near the fire. "She's no threat to us. Not now, anyway." James lowered the gun, but kept it in hand, the smooth walnut grip disappearing into his small palm. "Who is she, Pa?" "Apache woman. Found her half dead at our gate." Mason stripped off his gloves, revealing hands calloused from years of ranch work. Tommy, 7 years old and still clinging to boyhood curiosity, peered around his brother's shoulder. Unlike James, he still carried the softness of childhood in his face. "Is she gonna die like Ma did?" The words hung in the room like gun smoke after a firefight. Mason's jaw tightened as he checked the woman's wound. "No, not if I can help it." Mason Wade hadn't always been a rancher. The war had made him many things: soldier, scout, eventually a field medic when too many good men were bleeding out in Virginia mud. He'd learned to extract bullets with nothing but a knife and steady hands. He cleaned the wound with his best whiskey, dug out the lead ball with surgical precision, and stitched her up with catgut thread. As dawn broke, the woman's eyes snapped open, obsidian dark, fierce, and immediately alert. Her hand flew to her side where a knife would normally be. "Looking for this?" Mason held up a bone-handled blade with Apache carvings. "Found it in your boot. Well balanced. Good steel. You'll get it back when I'm sure you won't use it on me or my boys." She assessed him silently, calculating, her gaze flicking to the exits, the windows, the 2 boys watching from the staircase. A survivor's instinct. Mason recognized it because he had it too. "Why?" Her voice was rough from cold and thirst. Mason poured a cup of coffee from the cast-iron pot on the wood stove and set it within her reach. "Why what?" "Why save me? White men don't usually bother." He shrugged. "My house, my rules, and I don't let people freeze to death on my property." "Aida," she said after a long moment. "My name is Aida. Mason Wade. Those are my boys, James and Tommy." He nodded toward the stairs. "Now, Who put that 44 caliber slug in you, and why were you running in a blizzard? Her eyes darkened. Nathaniel Dixon. People call him Deadeye. Mason's cup stopped halfway to his lips. Dixon? The name sent ice through his veins colder than any Montana winter. You sure about that? I watched him murder my entire tribe 3 weeks ago. I will never forget his face. Her hand unconsciously touched a leather pouch hidden beneath her clothing. Or the patch over his left eye. Dixon and his gang hit a stagecoach outside town last week, killed 3 people, including the Wells Fargo man. Mason's voice hardened. Whatever trouble you're in, you just brought it to my doorstep. James stepped forward, gripping his revolver tighter. Pa, we should turn her in. If Dixon's after her, we're not turning anyone in, Mason cut him off. But she's not staying either. Once this blizzard breaks, you're gone, he told Aida. I've got these boys to think about. The storm raged for 3 days. Aida kept to herself, moving silently through the house like a shadow. Despite her wound, she worked, cooking, mending clothes, tending the fire. Mason watched her from the corner of his eye, noting the precise, economical way she moved, the way she always kept her back to a wall, the way her eyes constantly checked exits, the way of someone who'd survived worse than a bullet in a blizzard. On the 3rd night, James came to his father's room, eyes wide with excitement and suspicion. Pa, she's hiding something. I saw her looking at some kind of map, on deerskin with markings I ain't never seen before. Mason frowned. You sure? Yes, sir. She hid it real quick when she saw me watching. Later that night, Mason noticed something he'd missed before. Drops of blood on his floor, not from the shoulder wound he'd treated, but from another hidden injury. Ato was more than just a survivor. She was running from something specific, and Mason Wade had learned the hard way that secrets got people killed. The blizzard finally broke, leaving behind a pristine white landscape and temperatures cold enough to freeze spit before it hit the ground. Mason found Aida preparing to leave, her meager possessions wrapped in a small bundle. Wait, he said, blocking the door. I've got a proposition. She regarded him warily, hand instinctively reaching for the knife he'd returned that morning. I need help with this ranch. Winter's harsh, and I've got 2 boys who need to learn how to survive out here. He gestured to the vast property beyond the windows. You've got skills. I've seen how you track, hunt, make medicine from plants I'd walk right past. What are you suggesting? Suspicion edged her voice. A straight deal. You stay, teach my boys what you know, help with the ranch. In return, you get shelter, protection, and a share of what we make come spring. Mason laid it out plain, the way he did all business. No flowery promises, just practicality. Aida's eyes narrowed. You trust an Apache woman in your home? What will your town say? Mason's laugh was hard and short. I don't give a damn what Deadwood Falls thinks of me. Haven't since I buried my wife. Not a marriage, she clarified. Not a marriage, he agreed. A partnership. Practical. Nothing more. She studied him for a long moment. I accept, but I have conditions. I come and go as I please. And if Dixon's men come, I leave immediately. I won't bring death to your sons. Mason nodded once. Fair enough. A week later, they rode into Deadwood Falls for supplies. The small frontier town consisted of one muddy main street lined with false-fronted buildings. Saloon, general store, livery, and Wilkins' gunsmith shop that was their destination. Mason needed ammunition. Winchester 4440 cartridges for his rifle, 36 caliber rounds for the Navy Colt, and shotgun shells for the Greener 10 gauge that hung above his mantle. The moment they entered, conversation died. Eyes tracked Ada like gun sights as she moved through the store. Mason felt the tension like electricity before a lightning strike. Wilkins, the gunsmith, set down the Sharps rifle he was cleaning. Don't serve Injuns here, Wade. She's with me, Mason said evenly, hand resting casually near his holster. Don't care if she's with the president. No Injuns. Mason's voice remained calm, but something in his eyes made Wilkins step back. Seems to me you sold 3 Winchester rifles to those crow hunters last month. That's different, is it? Mason picked up a box of cartridges. We need ammunition. 20 boxes of 44-40 for the Winchester, 10 of 36 caliber for the Navy Colts, and 5 boxes of shells for the Greener. And I don't want to ask twice. A tense silence followed before Wilkins reluctantly began gathering the supplies. As they loaded their purchases onto their horses, a burly man with a silver star pinned to his coat approached. His face was weathered like old leather, nose broken multiple times in bar fights long past. Wade, he acknowledged. Been a while. Tucker, Mason nodded to the former sheriff. Something on your mind? Tucker glanced at Aida, then back to Mason. Might want to watch yourself. Dixon's gang has been spotted 20 miles south. Word is they're hunting an Apache. Something about a treasure map. Mason's gaze snapped to Aida, whose face remained impassive. Appreciate the warning. That night, while Aida taught Tommy how to set snares for rabbits using braided horsehair, Mason searched her belongings. He found it wrapped in oilcloth and hidden in the lining of her saddle. An intricately drawn map on deerskin, marked with symbols he didn't recognize, and one he did. The universal sign for gold. He was studying it when her voice came from behind him. That belongs to me. Her tone was deadly calm. Mason turned slowly. This is what Dixon is after, isn't it? Her silence was answer enough. Gold, he said, holding up the map. You're risking your life, and now my family's, for gold. Not just gold. Aida stepped forward, snatching the map from his hands. A sacred site of my people, a hidden canyon where our ancestors mined gold for generations. I am the last one who knows its location. And Dixon wants it. Dixon wants to exploit it, to destroy it. Her eyes flashed with anger and grief. I would rather die than let him desecrate what belongs to my people. Mason's fist slammed into the wall. Damn it, woman. You brought this danger to my door without a word. Dixon won't just kill you if he finds you here. He'll kill all of us. That's why I tried to leave, she shouted back. Their argument was interrupted by Tommy rushing in, face pale with fear. Pa, James is gone. What? Mason grabbed the boy's shoulders. He left a note. Tommy handed over a crumpled paper. Says he's going to find Dixon. Says Dixon's the one who really killed Ma, not the fever like you told us. The blood drained from Mason's face. He turned to Aida, fury and fear warring in his eyes. If anything happens to my son, We need to find him, she cut him off. Now! They rode hard through the night, Aida tracking James's trail with uncanny precision, even in the darkness. She noted broken twigs, disturbed snow, a partial footprint that Mason would have missed entirely. As dawn broke, she raised her hand for silence, pointing to a thin column of smoke rising from a small canyon ahead. Dixon's camp, she whispered. 5 men, maybe 6. 2 Spencer, repeating rifles, a Henry, and what looks like a Sharps buffalo gun. Mason was impressed despite himself. How do you know all that? Tracks, boot prints, cartridge casings. She pointed to subtle signs Mason could barely make out. And I know my son is there, she added, surprising both of them with her choice of words. They've captured someone James's size. The drag marks show they were forcing someone his weight. Mason's face hardened into a mask of barely controlled rage. My wife wasn't taken by fever, he said quietly. Dixon's gang attacked our wagon 2 years ago on the road to Fort Benton. They shot her for the gold watch her father gave her, worth maybe $20. Aida nodded grimly. Then we both have scores to settle. They crawled to the edge of a rocky outcropping, Below, Dixon's men were gathered around a campfire. James sat tied to a tree stump, face bruised but defiant. A tall man with a patch over one eye paced in front of him. Nathaniel Deadeye Dixon himself, a Bowie knife twirling between his fingers. "We split up," Aida whispered. "You take position on that ridge with the rifle. When I create a distraction, you take out as many as you can. I'll free the boy." "That's suicide," Mason hissed. She met his eyes. "You have a better plan?" He didn't. Mason positioned himself on the ridge, sighting down his Winchester. Aida had disappeared into the underbrush like a ghost. Minutes passed. Then suddenly the far side of the camp erupted in flames as Aida's fire arrows struck the outlaws' ammunition wagon. Chaos erupted. Mason fired methodically, working the lever action with surgical precision. One shot, one kill. The first outlaw dropped with a chest wound, never knowing what hit him. The second managed to draw before Mason's second shot caught him in the throat. Dixon and the others scattered for cover. Through the smoke, Mason saw Aida slip behind James, cutting his bonds with her bone-handled knife. But as they turned to escape, one of Dixon's men spotted them, raising his Colt Dragoon. Mason's shot caught the man in the chest, but not before he fired. Aida stumbled, clutching her side but kept moving, pushing James ahead of her toward the trees. Mason provided covering fire until they reached his position, then they retreated together, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. They didn't stop until they reached a densely wooded area 5 miles away. James was shaking but unhurt. Aida, however, had a fresh bullet graze across her ribs. "You're hit," Mason said, reaching for her. "It's nothing." She waved him off. "Your son is safe. That's what matters." James looked between them, confusion and shame warring on his young face. "You came for me. Both of you." Aida knelt in front of him, her voice gentle but firm. "Family protects each other, even new family." For the first time, James looked at her without suspicion, seeing instead the woman who had risked her life for his. Something shifted in the boy's eyes. Not acceptance, not yet, but the beginning of respect. "Dixon will follow," Mason said grimly, checking his ammunition. "We need to prepare." They reached Lone Wolf Ranch by nightfall, moving quickly and covering their tracks as Aida had taught them. Tommy ran from the house, flinging himself into his brother's arms, sobbing with relief. "We don't have much time," Mason said, checking his weapons. "Dixon won't be far behind." Aida nodded. "We make our stand here." Throughout the night, they fortified the ranch house and barn. Mason distributed weapons and ammunition at strategic points. The Winchester by the front window, the Navy Colt under a cushion in the sitting room, the Greener shotgun loaded with buckshot by the kitchen door. Aida set traps around the perimeter, simple but effective snares and pitfalls she'd learned from her tribe. She showed James how to make caltrops from nails that could puncture a horse's hoof, while Mason and Tommy filled buckets with water in case of fire. "If things go wrong," Mason told the boys, "there's a cellar beneath the barn floor, hidden entrance under the hay bales in the third stall. You hide there and don't come out until one of us calls you. Understand?" They nodded solemnly. Mason took James aside, pressing the Navy Colt into his hands. "This was my father's gun. Got me through the war. Now it might need to protect you and your brother." "I know how to use it, Pa," James said, eyes steady. "I know you do, son." Mason squeezed his shoulder. "But remember, you fire only if there's no other choice. A man takes no pleasure in killing, but he doesn't hesitate when his family's at stake." As dawn approached, Aida found Mason on the porch, loading cartridges into his belt. Without a word, she handed him a small leather pouch. "What's this?" "Apache medicine, for courage and clear sight." He studied her face in the dim light. "Never thought I'd fight alongside an Apache. Never thought I'd die protecting a white man's home," she countered, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Who said anything about dying?" Mason's voice was gruff, But something softer lurked beneath the surface. A horse whinnied nervously in the barn. Then another. Mason tensed, raising his rifle. "They're here," Aida whispered. The attack came with the first light of dawn. 6 riders emerged from the tree line. Dixon at their center, his one eye gleaming with malice. They spread out, approaching the ranch from different directions. "Last chance, Wade," Dixon called out. "Send out the Apache woman in the map, and maybe I'll let you and those brats live." Mason's answer was a rifle shot that knocked Dixon's hat from his head. The battle erupted instantly. Gunfire tore through the morning air. Mason dropped one rider from his position by the porch. Aida's arrow found another's throat from her hiding place in the barn loft. Dixon and his remaining men took cover behind the water trough and wagon. They laid down suppressing fire as 2 men circled toward the back of the house. "The boys!" Mason shouted. Aida was already moving, slipping out the barn's rear door. She intercepted the first man with her knife, striking from behind with lethal precision. The second turned his gun on her, but James appeared from nowhere, swinging a shovel that caught the outlaw in the back of the knees. As he fell, Aida finished him. She looked at James with new respect. "Well struck." He nodded, breathing hard but steady. The gunfight intensified. A stray bullet hit a lantern in the barn, igniting the hay. Flames leapt upward, engulfing the structure within minutes. Black smoke billowed into the sky. In the confusion, Dixon made his move. He crashed through the ranch house window, rolling to his feet with pistols drawn. Mason fired, but his shot went wide. Dixon's return fire caught him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Mason struggled to his feet, blood soaking his shirt, but Dixon was already moving deeper into the house. "Tommy!" Mason shouted, realizing his youngest was still inside. He staggered after Dixon, following the sound of breaking furniture and Tommy's frightened cry. He found them in the kitchen, Dixon holding Tommy by the collar, using the boy as a shield. "Throw down your gun, Wade," Dixon sneered, "or the boy joins his mother." Mason lowered his rifle, hatred burning in his eyes. "Let him go. This is between us. No, this is business." Dixon pressed his pistol to Tommy's temple. "Tell your Apache woman to bring me the map. Now." "She's not here," Mason lied. "She left with it this morning." "Liar!" Dixon backhanded Tommy, splitting the boy's lip. "I saw her fighting my men." From the corner of his eye, Mason saw movement. James and Aida at the back door, communicating silently with hand signals. They'd planned something. Mason just needed to keep Dixon talking. "You want the map so bad?" Mason asked, taking a step forward. "Why? You were never much for prospecting, Dixon." "That gold mine is worth a fortune," Dixon snarled. "Enough to buy my way into something bigger than this godforsaken territory." "You killed my wife for a $20 watch," Mason said, voice thick with contempt. "What makes you think you deserve a fortune?" Dixon laughed. "Deserve? No one deserves anything in this world, Wade. You take what you want or you die in the dirt." Tommy's eyes met his father's, and Mason saw something there. Not just fear, but determination. The boy had seen Aida's signal too. In one fluid motion, Tommy stomped hard on Dixon's instep and ducked. As Dixon's grip loosened, James fired from the doorway, not at Dixon, but at the rope holding the cast iron pot above the stove. The pot crashed down, striking Dixon's gun arm. Aida burst through the door, knife flashing. Dixon recovered quickly, backhanding her across the face. She fell, momentarily stunned. "I'll kill you all," Dixon snarled, aiming at Mason's head. "Then I'll find that map if I have to burn this whole valley too." The gunshot was deafening in the confined space. Dixon looked down in surprise at the bloom of red spreading across his chest. Behind him stood Tommy, holding his father's dropped revolver in shaking hands, the weapon almost too big for his small frame. Dixon fell to his knees, then toppled forward. Dead. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leader fall and the ranch house surrounded by flames, broke and ran. James fired a few parting shots from the Winchester, driving them further away. Mason staggered to his feet, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked at Tommy, then at the gun, then at his youngest son's trembling form. "You did what you had to do," he said gently, taking the revolver from the boy's grasp. "That's all any man can do." 6 months later, spring had transformed Lone Wolf Ranch. The rebuilt barn stood taller and stronger than before. Fields that had lain fallow for 2 years now sprouted with crops. A small herd of cattle grazed on the north pasture, the beginning of a new breeding stock. Mason stood on the ridge overlooking his property, the Bowie knife that had once belonged to Dixon now hanging from his belt. A reminder of the price they'd paid. His shoulder still ached when rain threatened, but he'd regained full use of his arm. Some scars, he'd learned, were worth bearing. Aita approached, carrying a water skin. Her hair was braided with beads that caught the sunlight. They stood in comfortable silence, watching James teaching Tommy how to track a rabbit through tall grass below. "You could have left a dozen times," Mason said finally. "Taken that map and found your gold." "I buried the map," she replied, "under the new barn. Gold brings only death and greed, but this land," she gestured to the ranch spread before them, "this brings life." Mason nodded slowly. "My lawyer in town has drawn up papers, making you full partner in Lone Wolf Ranch. Equal share, equal say." She turned to him, surprise evident in her usually guarded expression. "You saved my boys, helped rebuild everything we lost." His voice roughened. "You've earned your place here, if you want it." Before she could answer, James called up to them from below. He was holding something in his hands, a worn blue shawl that had belonged to his mother. "Ma used to say every home needs a woman's touch," he said, holding it out to Aita. "Think you could wear this? Gets cold up here, even in spring." Aita took the shawl with reverent hands, understanding the gift for what it was: acceptance, family. "I would be honored," she said softly. That evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of fire. Tommy had fallen asleep against Aita's side, while James whittled a piece of wood with his new knife, a gift from Aita. Mason looked at the woman and boys beside him, the silent strength in Aita's eyes, the growing confidence in James, the peaceful sleep of Tommy, no longer haunted by nightmares of his mother's death. "A man isn't measured by what he owns or what he wants," Mason said, breaking the comfortable silence. "He's measured by what he'll fight for, what he'll die for." He met Aita's eyes. "And what he lives for." She nodded, understanding the declaration for what it was. "This land, these boys, this home," Mason continued, his voice gaining strength. "This is what I'll fight for until my dying breath. Some men spend their whole lives searching for gold, but the real treasure?" He looked at his sons, then back at Aita. "It's right here." Aita's hand found his, rough palm against rough palm, not a declaration of love, something stronger, a bond forged in blood and fire, a commitment to stand together against whatever came next. The price of survival had been high, but the reward, this hard-won peace, this unlikely family built from the ashes of tragedy, was beyond measure. In the distance, a wolf howled, a solitary cry that echoed across the valley. But here on the porch of Lone Wolf Ranch, no one stood alone anymore.